are some very small insects, New Zealand natives, and these so happen to be feeding on hemlock flowers, and anyone seeing hemlock flowers are very small. Hemlock here is common. The late botanist colleague Alan Esler said that if you want to find hemlock, come here in Auckland. Okay. But I don't know how you extract the poison to use, so I'm not too sure on that part. You know, this attracts some native insects. That's a more delid beetle, which is a tumbling beetle. It's very small, again a native which has come because it's a pollen feeder. It just comes looking for pollen. Another one is the so-called Zorian beetle, another small cerambycid, and this is the cerambycid, this is more delid. Again, pollen feeders. They don't really mind, they're not looking for feeding on leaves and everything, they're just looking for pollen. So these are sorts of insects which can retain in your garden, and these are the beneficials type. These help to help say this is a healthy area to be in when you get this diversity.
They don't like the wild carrot, do they?
They do.
They do.
Yeah, our wild carrots, there's a whole lot, and I've actually got a photo of one which is here of the fennel. They also on fennel. There's all these species there, 4 introduced species from other parts of the world. Just feeding on fennel here, looking for food. A blow was a surfer fly, which imitates the honeybee. Honeybee down there. It's the Palestes wasp, and the green blowfly, European greenbottle. Yeah, so these are what I'm trying to get to here now. You can see a lot of introduced insects around the place. People get used to seeing the monarch butterfly as being a thing here. And we have plenty of swan plant around the place that grows wild to allow monarchs to survive. The various types of ladybird. There's the steely blue ladybird. I know you won't be able to see these at the back, but you can look at these later. The steely blue, which is a good predator, that's around. But coming around here, is the harder beetle, which this actually eats the plants. A ladybird that eats plants. So this is one that we don't want, but it outcompetes many other parts. Yeah, I'll skip through the things except for what's coming through now. Guava moth. It gets into many things, which causes many problems. This season hasn't been as bad as last season for us here, for the park. But what we've found is we've got 2 almond trees out there, and they look like they're shriveled peaches. Well, the guava moth enjoys the outside skin of the almonds. We find that when it gets into plums,
Are they still edible then or not? Is the almonds still edible after?
oh yes, they are. Because of the almonds, I'll show you, if they're in the shell, you'll be able to sample some of our fantastic almonds from here, which have a marzipan taste to them, for those who like marzipan. If it's in plums or feijoa, those are the ones that fall off the tree first, or ripen first on the tree. You can cut it out, but sometimes there's just too much of it when you're going. The main part of control, as with many things, is you just have to pick up everything from the ground, because the larva, the caterpillar, pupates in the ground. If you leave the fruit on the ground that's been infected, you're going to have another season, and because it can go all year round with different things, gets into lemons, can get into so many different things, you're going to build up your pest population.
Can
So-
you pick guava and vijay before, I thought when things dropped on the ground that was the right time to pick them up, especially on those plants.
It is for harvesting, but those that fall first are likely to be infected. They mature first on the tree and drop off first. And for the plums, they are the ones that show the signs of ripening first. The chlorophyll disappears and takes on a red or some other colour.
You get to see the evidence of the guava moth in guavas.
Yeah, and that's because, that's leads in nicely, because the guava that we grow out here is not the guava. That is, because ours is a guava from South America. It's not the true guava. Yeah, yeah. So that's confusing to some people too. And that's one of the problems of common names being used. And this is why the value, even though it may be seem pedantic, of the scientific names at times, so you don't get this sort of confusion.
Do they like almonds in preference to other things?
Well, they seem to here for this year, and we're quite happy for that, because we just husk the almonds, put all those in the bucket and put water in it and let them drown. Kill them before composting, the rest of it. Unlike in the United States and California, where they grow all the almonds, the outside husk is cattle feed. It is a good feed for that. We've been having too many rabbits in this area, and we find that rabbits have been cleaning them up, they've been eating the outside skin, so we've been quite happy for the rabbits to eat the skin. But now we're getting the rabbits under control here, we hope. Yeah.
So I know they're not obviously not neighbours, but chickens are very good for picking up the fruit with the
Yes.
guava moss on the ground. But do you know if they predate a lot of the native insects?
Oh, the chickens will take anything that moves, including mice and everything. That they will. They are true omnivores. Yeah. So if it moves, it's fair game. Yeah.
There's a downside.
Yeah. But I think and we get the various moths and that, and of course there are various spiders around. The big nursery web spider, that's a native species going through, and it's good to see around. And this is an unusual photo that the female's up on the web guarding the part. You usually don't get it. Whereas other ones are spiders, such as the slater spider, which eats slaters, the crustacea in preference. That is one from overseas. And the two-spine spider, which is a small one, the female. The male is just a minute beside it. That actually puts down a thread web. Its web is a thread with a drop on it, which it waves around, which has a pheromone which attracts the male tortricid moths. So the moths come and get stuck on the thread, and there's the meal. So it's a good biocontrol agent for tortricid moths, for the things. And that includes those are the moths that cause
What about the Avondale
podding
spider?
moth. Avondale spider.
Is that the huntsman, is it?
That's a huntsman spider, and it's not here. I've dealt with that years ago and the things, and its habitat in Avondale has been drastically reduced with the land changing uses, going to housing, that is.
Native.
No, Australia. And it's one of the species, and that was 19 1990 to 1991, we supplied about 300 of those spiders to for Steven Spielberg for a film on arachnophobia. That's where so we earned a bit of money for the country getting rid of them. Australia could not send them to America because it was a native species. We could. And most of the ones that we sent were reared in the lab. The body is about that, with the leg span. But the best thing is,
overall, net the wisdom.
it's probably about they can get, for the ones that you get for the so-called Avondale spider, you can get bigger, but everyone has their fishy story about Avondale spiders, or the part. But
I've seen them as big as a dinner plate.
yeah,
Running up the wall.
they always look scary when they're skittering around, but they're one of the friendliest little spiders around. All they want to do is when you hold them, they just hold them. They like to feel things on their back and on their front, all the things. They're looking for that tactile. That's why and that's because where they live is in bark of trees, which moving things. So that's their safe place.
Do they make a big wheel or not?
No,
Don't make any wheel.
they huntsmen are out at night hunting. For those who want some details about the things, there's a fantastic resource. I gave it to Adrian last year when I couldn't give the talk, but to repeat it, it's a colleague, Nick Martin, who was Crop and Food. He's had to stop on doing this now because he had a stroke about a year ago, which has caused him very frustration. As for those who read this on the listener, you'll be able to see he occasionally writes his letters there. He's put together a whole lot of, with people, a whole lot of information about New Zealand insects with photos of all the things. There's close to 100, and it's under NZAC NZAC fact sheets .landcareresearch.co.nz. You can get the thing. That is probably the best source of information now on New Zealand insects which affect things, the natives, and those that affect gardens and when they were here. There's a lot of detail. NZAC fact sheets, one word. Landcareresearch. Landcareresearch.co.nz. I want to just go for the specialness of the New Zealand fauna, for the insects, going beyond the garden, going through to show the difference between native areas and human modified areas. And this was a study by a colleague who just died a few years ago, aged 99, Willie Cushel. He was one of the world's weevil specialists. He came through. He had a lot of his education in Chile. He was the first person to get a PhD in natural sciences in Chile. He came to New Zealand. Although he was a priest, he gave that up to married another entomologist and had a very productive career here in New Zealand. But he went the best at age 99, going through in the morning. He finished the paper, went in to his room to have a rest, and never woke up. What a way to go. Yeah.
Especially finishing the paper.
Yeah, he just finished the paper that he wanted to do. Yeah. But Willie, entomology division, DSII, used to be based down at Nelson. And in 1973, it was brought up here to Auckland, to Mount Albert. Of course, a lot of kerfuffle for those at the time. So Willie started to go nearby. He lived in Tropicana Ave in Linfield. He talked to Sabritsky's, who had the farm next door, which has now just been sold to one of the aged care providers or retirement village providers, which is now going to go into a village. But he looked at the net for the area for Linfield and see what beetles were there. And for the Linfield area, the coast, there were patches of bush and going around here, and he lived there. There's about just over 20 hectares of modified habitat, include exotics and New Zealand modified regrowth. What he found over a course of 15 years, by the time he published this in 1991, just under 1,000 species of beetle in that area. 1,000 species. About 3/4, 750, were New Zealand natives. About 250 were introduced from other parts of the world, mainly Europe and Australia.
That must have taken a lot of research, Trevor.
Yeah, it was a lot there involved, and it was, in fact, this is part of building up part of what is known for the biodiversity, for the things in a suburban environment. This study was one of the first in the world to look in a suburban area to see what was actually going on with urbanisation in detail. There are now other studies, but this is the first.
So are we losing all this?
There's
all
some,
the
we're
development?
losing some, but it's not as bad because little patches of, as we cut to the chase, little patches of New Zealand native bush or regrowth matter.
Yeah.
It may not be good enough for birds to survive, but it's more small 100, 200 square metre patch of native vegetation will retain some. A hectare is even better for the park because then you lose the edge effects of the things, hence where it's located. Now, he looked at these beetles and in all the different sorts of habitats, from the seashore to the disturbed human habitats. There are about 17 different habitats. Within the regrowth forest, he found the beetles were New Zealand natives were almost invariably only in the areas of native vegetation. Almost invariably. Even when you looked at things which are grown in gardens, such as coprosmas, hebes, your cabbage trees, cordyline and nikau, you may have them in your gardens, and they may be there in the second growth and other things a couple hundred metres away, or even less, but you will not get them in the gardens. It's not the right environment. The plants may be there, but the environment's not right. What he found is about, of these New Zealand natives, just over half were those that lived on the ground above, on the leaves and other things. So it means collecting, you see about half the New Zealand of these beetles are available just by beating bushes or visibly on the earth. The other, just under half, are in the soil, in the park. And it's the leaf litter, breaking down the leaf litter, and with eating the fungi that's breaking down the leaf litter, and all the dynamics of many different small species. When we talk about small, the smallest beetle was a small featherwing beetle, which is 0.6 of a millimetre long. 0.6. And he also found under the Purakawa along the coastline, living in the soil down, and by you call deep pit traps, you put them, make a hole in the ground and put a container at the bottom and things that nearby they will come out, and these were mostly dug about half a metre deep. There was a little blind weevil about 2 metres long, and that's again was a new species for New Zealand. On that site here there were, of the New Zealand native species that he found, there were about 120 species that had not been described formally, scientifically. And some have already been now described, so Linfield is a so-called type locality for at least 30 different species of beetle, as well as other